Hey, boys and girls, it's time for Chapter 6, The Box in the Closet. Okay, remember in yesterday's chapter we had Lina that bought those real expensive colored pencils. Remember, she paid $5 each, okay? And Granny needed a coat, but she thought she could save her money up and get Granny a coat later. All right, this chapter, The Box in the Closet. It was strange how people didn't talk much about the blackout. Power failures usually aroused lively discussion, with clumps of people collecting on corners and saying to each other, "Where were you when it happened?" And, "What's the matter with electricians? We should kick them out and get new ones." And that sort of thing. This time, it was just the opposite. When Lina went to work the next morning, the street was oddly silent. People walked quickly, their eyes on the ground. Those who did stop to talk spoke in low voices, then hurried on their way. That day, Lina carried the same message 12 times. All the messengers were carrying it. It was simply this, being passed from one person to another. 7 minutes. The power failure had been more than twice as long as any other so far. Fear had settled over the city. Lina felt like a cold chill. Like a cold chill. Simile. She understood now that Dune had been speaking the truth on assignment day. Ember was in grave danger. Grave, very serious. The next day, a notice appeared on all the city's kiosks. Town meeting. All citizens are requested to assemble in Harkin Square at 6 p.m. tomorrow to receive important information. Mayor Lemander Cole. What kind of important information? Lina wondered. Good news or bad? She was impatient to hear it. The next day, people streamed into Harkin Square from all 4 directions, crowding together so close that each person hardly had room to move. Children sat on the shoulders of fathers. Short people tried to push toward the front. Lina spotted Lizzie and called a greeting to her. She saw Vendy Chance, too, who had brought her little brother. Lina had decided to leave Poppy at home with Granny. There was too much danger of losing her in a crowd like this. The town clock began to strike. 6 vibrating bongs rang out, and a murmur of anticipation swept through the crowd. People stood on tiptoe, craning to see. The door of the gathering hall opened, and the mayor came out, flanked by 2 guards. Flanked means one on either side. One of the guards handed the mayor a megaphone, and the mayor began to speak. His voice came through the megaphone both blurry and crackly. "People of Ember," he said. He waited. The crowd fell silent, straining to hear. "People of Ember," the mayor said again. He looked from side to side. The light glinted off his bald head. "Our city has experienced some slight difficulty. Something like this require gresh passion frugal." "What did he say?" People whispered urgently. "What did he say? I couldn't hear him." "Slight difficulties," someone said, "requires great patience from us all." "But I stand here today," the mayor went on, "to reassure you, difficult times will pass. We are make effin effoof." "What?" came the sharp whisper. "What did he say?" Those near the front passed the word back. "Making every effort," they said. "Every effort." "Louder!" someone shouted. The mayor's voice blared through the megaphone, louder, but even less clear. "Worsch Plushing," he said. "Pank mushin' pank. No rushin' pank. We can't hear you, someone else yelled. Lina felt a stirring around her, a muttering. Someone pushed against her back, forcing her forward. He said we mustn't panic, someone said. He said panic is the worst possible thing. No reason to panic, he said. On the steps of the gathering hall, the two guards moved a little closer to the mayor. He raised the megaphone and spoke again. Solutions, he bellowed, are being found. Solutions, the people in front called to the people in the back. Solutions are being found, he said. What solutions? Called a woman standing near Lina. People elsewhere in the crowd echoed what the woman had said. What solutions? What solutions? Their cry became a chorus, louder and louder. Again, Lina felt the pressure from behind. As people moved forward, I'm getting up for a second, toward the gathering hall, jostling arms poked her. Bulky bodies bumped her and crushed her. Her heart began to pound. I have to get out of here, she thought. She started ducking beneath arms and darting into whatever space she could find, making her way toward the rear of the crowd. Noise was rising everywhere. The mayor's voice kept coming in blasts of incomprehensible sound, and the people in the crowd were either shouting angrily or yelping in fear of being squashed. Someone stepped on Lina's foot, and her scarf was half yanked off. For a few seconds, she was afraid she was going to be trampled, but at last she struggled free and ran up onto the steps of the school. From there, she saw that the two guards were hustling the mayor back through the door of the gathering hall. The crowd roared, and a few people started hurling whatever they could find: pebbles, garbage, crumpled paper, even their own hats. There's Paco. At the other side of the square, Dune and his father battled their way down Gilly Street. Move fast, his father said. We don't want to be caught up in this crowd. They crossed Broad Street and took the long way home, through the narrow lanes behind the school. Father, said Dune as they hurried along, the mayor is a fool, don't you think? For a moment, his father didn't answer. Then he said, he's in a tough spot, son. What would you have had him do? Well, not lie, at least, Dune said. If he really has a solution, he should have told us. He shouldn't pretend he has solutions when he doesn't. Dune's father smiled. Well, that would be a good start, he agreed. It makes me so angry the way he talks to us, said Dune. Dune's father put a hand on Dune's back and steered him toward the corner. A great many things make you angry lately, he said. Well, for good reason, said Dune. Maybe. The trouble with anger is it gets a hold of you, and then you aren't the master of yourself anymore. Anger is. Dune walked on silently. Inwardly, he groaned. He knew what his father was going to say, and he didn't feel like hearing it. And when anger is the boss, you get... Let's think about that. When anger is the boss, that's like two things. When it's saying anger is the same as the boss, that's not a simile, that's a metaphor. And when you're pretending like anger is alive, like a boss can tell you what to do, like an anger is in charge of you, what other kind of figurative language is that? Personification. And when anger is the boss, you get, I know, said Dune, unintended consequences. That's right, like hitting your father in the ear with a shoe heel. Well, I didn't mean to. Well, that's exactly my point. They walked on down Pibb Street. Doone shoved his hands into the pockets of his jacket and scowled at the sidewalk. Father doesn't even have a temper, he thought. He's as mild as a glass of water. Simile. He can't possibly understand. Lina was running. She had already dismissed the mayor's speech from her mind. She sped by people on Otterwheel Street, going back to open their stores, and overheard snatches of conversation as she passed. "Expects us to believe," said one voice. "He's just trying to keep us quiet," said another. "Heading for disaster," said a third. All the voices shook with anger and fear. Lina didn't want to think about it. Her feet slapped the stones of the street. Her hair flew out behind her. She would go home, she would make potato soup for the three of them, and she would take out her new pencils and draw. She climbed the stairs next to the yarn shop, 2 at a time, and burst through the door of the apartment. Something was on the floor just in front of her feet, and she tripped and fell down hard on her hands and knees. She stared. By the open closet door was a great pile of coats and boots and bags and boxes, their contents all spilled out and tangled up. A thumping and rattling came from inside the closet. "Granny?" More thumps. Granny's head poked around the edge of the closet door. "I should have looked in here a long time ago," she said. "This is where it would be, of course. You should see what's in here." Lina gazed around at the incredible mess. Into this closet had been packed the junk of decades, jammed into cardboard boxes, stuffed into old pillowcases and laundry bags, and heaped up into a pile so dense that you couldn't pull one thing out without pulling all the rest with it. Remember, this is the same apartment that 6th mayor was in. So that's like her great-grandfather, or her great-great. This apartment has been in their family a long time. And remember, the 6th mayor was the one that caused the problem and threw that box into the closet, the box that was supposed to open after 200 years with the directions of getting out of Ember. This is what the builders set up so long ago, when something in the outside world was happening. And we don't know what that is. But somehow the earth as we know it, okay, these trees, okay, the sun, everything that's out here with me today, they don't know anything about this. They've never seen it. Because when they were put down there, their ancestors that were put down here, these aren't the same people, of course, because it's been about 250 years. But they were given everything they needed, and they were supposed to last 200 years. But see, Ember's running out of everything. The shelf above the coat rack was just as crammed as the space below, mostly with old clothes that were full of moth holes and eaten away by mildew. When she was younger, Lina had tried exploring in this closet, but she never got far. She would pull out an old scarf that would fall to pieces in her hands, or open a box that proved to be full of bent carpet tacks. Soon she would shove everything back in and give up. But Granny was really doing the job right. She grunted and panted as she wrenched free the closet's packed-in stuff and tossed it behind her. It was clear that she was having fun. As Lina watched, a bag of rags came tumbling out the door, and then an old brown shoe with no laces. "Granny?" said Lina, suddenly uneasy. "Where's the baby?" "Oh, she's here," came Granny's voice from the depths of the closet. "She's been helping me." Lina got up from the floor and looked around. She soon spotted Poppy. She was sitting behind the couch, in the midst of the clutter. In front of her was a small box made of something dark and shiny. It had a hinged lid. A hinged lid means it opens and closes. Remember that box? Shiny. And the lid was open, hanging backward. "Poppy," said Lina, "let me see that." She stooped down. There was some sort of mechanism on the edge of the lid, a kind of lock, Lina thought. The box was beautifully made, but it had been damaged. There were dents and scratches in its hard, smooth surface. It looked as if it had been a container for something valuable, but the box was empty now. Lina picked it up and felt around in it to be sure. There was nothing inside at all. Was there something inside this box, Poppy? Did you find something in here? But Poppy only chortled happily. She was chewing on some crumbled paper. She had paper in her hands, too, and was tearing it. Shreds of paper were strewn around her. Lina picked one up. It was covered with small, perfect printing. Small, perfect printing, like it was typed. Okay, now they don't type things down in Ember. They haven't seen that. Chapter 7. A message full of holes. It was the printing that sparked Lina's curiosity. It was not handwriting, or if it was the neatest, most regular handwriting she had ever seen. It was more like the letters printed on cans of food or along the sides of pencils. Something other than a hand had written those words. A machine, perhaps, of some kind? This was the writing of the builders, and so this piece of paper must have come from the builders too. Lina gathered up the scraps of paper from the floor and gently pried open Poppy's fist and mouth to extract the crumpled wads. She put all this inside the dented box and carried it to her room. That evening, Granny and the baby were both asleep. By a little after 8, Lina had nearly an hour to examine her discovery. She took the scraps from the box and spread them out on the table in her bedroom. The paper was thick. At each torn edge was a fringe of tangled fibers. There were many little pieces, and one big piece with so many holes that it was like a lace. The chewed bits were beyond saving. They were almost a paste. Kind of when you chew on something so much, it's like just wet paper. But Lina spread out the big lacy piece and saw that on one edge of it, which was still intact, was a column of numbers. She collected all of the dirty scraps and puzzled over them for a long time, trying to figure out where they fit into the larger piece. When she had arranged them as well as she could, this was what she had. Look at that. See the numbers down the side? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The very top says Instra, and then an R, and then Egress. And then it starts out, this old fish dock, Instri, secure, period of, ears, prepara, made for, Inha, city, as fall. And then you've got all those numbers, and you see all that stuff missing. This is where the mystery is going to begin. What's that word I'm looking for? Can't think of my word. To figure out the mystery of it, to put the words together, to decipher it. That's what I was looking for. Lina could make sense of only a few words here and there. I'm going to let you see all of the doggies with me today. You see all 4 of the doggies with us today? There's Gus and Paco and Sugar and Sadie. Got 4 sweet doggies listening to us today. They like the city of Ember too. And here comes the 5th one. Where's Jack? Can you see Jack? Okay. I didn't show you. Lina could make sense of only a few words here and there. Even so, something about this tattered document was exciting. It was not like anything Lina had ever seen. She stared at the very first word at the top of the page, instruct, and she suddenly knew what it must be. She had seen it often enough at school. It had to be the beginning of the word instructions. Her heart began knocking at her chest like a fist at a door. Okay, now that's kind of two types of figurative language too. Like a fist at the door. It's knocking like a fist. Okay? Simile. But also her heart knocking at her chest. She felt it so hard that's kind of like an exaggeration, like hyperbole also. She had found something. She had found something strange and important. Instructions for something. But for what? And how terrible that Poppy had found it first and ruined it. It occurred to Lina that this might be what her grandmother had been talking about for so long. Perhaps this was the thing that was lost. But of course, not knowing what had been lost, Granny wouldn't have recognized the box when she saw it. She would have tossed it out of the closet just as carelessly as she tossed everything else. Anyhow, it didn't matter whether this was the thing or not the thing. It was a mystery in itself. Whatever it was, and Lina was determined to solve it. The first step was to stick the scraps of paper down. They were so light that a breath could scatter them. She had a little bit of glue left in an old bottle. Painstakingly, she put a dot of glue on each of the scraps and pressed each one into its place on one of her precious few remaining whole sheets of paper. She put another piece of paper on top of this and set the box on top to flatten everything down. Just as she finished, the lights went out. She had forgotten to keep an eye on the clock in her windowsill. She had to undress and get in bed in the dark. Remember, the lights came on at 6 and went off at 9. She was too excited to sleep much that night. Her mind whirled around, trying to think what the message she had found might be. She felt sure it had something to do with saving the city. What if these instructions were for fixing the electricity? Or for making a movable light? That would change everything. When the lights went on in the morning, she had a few minutes before Poppy wakened to work at the puzzle. But there were so many words missing. How could she ever make sense of such a jumble? As she pulled her red jacket on and tied the frayed and knotted laces of her shoes, she thought about it. If the paper was important, she couldn't keep it to herself. But who could she tell? Maybe the messenger? Maybe the messenger captain? She would know about things like official documents. "Captain Fleary," Lina said when she got to work, "would you have some time to come home with me later on today? Just for a minute. I found something I'd like to show you." "Well, found what?" asked Captain Fleary. "Some paper with some writing on it. I think it might be important." Captain Fleary raised her skinny eyebrows. "What do you mean important?" "Well, I'm not sure. Maybe it isn't, but would you look at it anyway?" So that evening, Captain Fleary came home with Lina and peered at the bits of paper. She bent down and inspected the writing. "Ball," she said. "Axe, rim, aunt. What kind of words are those?" "I don't know," said Lina. "The words are all broken up." Okay. Gosh. Okay. Because Poppy chewed on them. "I see." "Okay, all right," said Captain Fleary. She poked at the paper. "This looks like instructions for something. A recipe, I suppose. Small steel pan. That would be what you used to cook with. But who would have such a small, perfect writing?" Well, that's the way they wrote in the old days, said Captain Fleary. It could be a very old recipe. But then, why would it have been kept in this beautiful box? She showed the box to Captain Fleary. I think it was locked up in here for some reason, and you wouldn't lock up something unless it was important. But Captain Fleary didn't seem to have heard her. Or, she said, it could be a school exercise, someone's homework that never got turned in. But have you ever seen paper like this? It doesn't look as if it came from somewhere else. Not here. Captain Fleary straightened up. A look of puzzlement came over her face. There is nowhere but here, she said. She put both her hands on Lina's shoulders. You, my dear, are letting your imagination run away with you. Are you overtired, Lina? Are you anxious? I could put you on short days for a while. No, said Lina. I'm fine. But I just don't know what to do about... She gestured toward the paper. Never mind, said Captain Fleary. Don't think about it. Throw it away. You're worrying too much. I know. We all are. There's much to worry about, but we mustn't let it unsettle us. She gave Lina a long look. Her eyes were the color of dishwater. Help is coming, she said. Help? Yes, coming to save us. Who is? Captain Fleary bent down and lowered her voice, as if telling a secret. Who built our city, dear? The builders, said Lina. That's right, and the builders will come again and show us the way. They will? Very soon, said Captain Fleary. Well, how do you know? Captain Fleary straightened up again and clapped a hand over her heart. I know here, she said, and I have seen it in a dream. So have all of us, all the believers. So that's what they believe, Lina thought, and Captain Fleary is one of them. She wondered how the captain could feel so sure about it, just because she'd seen it in a dream. Maybe it was the same for her as the sparkling city was for Lina. She wanted it to be true. The captain's face lit up. I know what you must do, dear. Come to one of our meetings. It would lift your heart. We sing. Oh, said Lina, thank you, but I'm not sure maybe sometime. She tried to be polite, but she knew she wouldn't go. She didn't want to stand around waiting for the builders. She had other things to do. Captain Fleary patted her arm. No pressure, dear, she said. If you change your mind, let me know. But take my advice. Forget about your little puzzle project. Lie down and take a nap. Clears the mind. Her narrow face beamed kindness down at Lina. You take tomorrow off, she said. She raised a hand goodbye and went down the stairs. Lina took advantage of her day off to go to the supply depot to see Lizzie Biscoe. Lizzie was quick and smart. She might have some good ideas. At the supply depot, crowds of shopkeepers stood in long, disorderly lines, all mixed up. They weren't in line like straight, that stretched out the door. They pushed and jostled and snapped impatiently at each other. Lina joined them, but they seemed so frantic that they frightened her a little. They must be very sure now that the supplies are running out, she thought, and they're determined to get what they can before it's too late. When she got close to the head of the line, she heard the same conversation several times. Sorry, the clerk would say when a shopkeeper asked for 10 packets of sewing needles, or a dozen drinking glasses, or 20 packages of light bulbs. There's a severe shortage of that item. You can only have one. Or else the clerk would say, sorry, we're out of that entirely. Forever? Forever. Lina knew that it hadn't always been this way. When Ember was a young city, the storerooms were full. They held everything the citizens could want. So much, it seemed, the supplies would never run out. Lina's grandmother had told her that school children were given a tour of the storerooms as part of their education. They took an elevator from the street level to a long, curving tunnel with doors on both sides and other tunnels branching off. The guide led the tour down the long passages, opening one door after another. This area, he would say, is canned goods. Next, we come to school supplies. And around this bin, we have kitchenware. Next come carpentry tools. At each door, the children crowded against each other to see. Every room had something different, Granny told Lina. Boxes of toothpaste in one room, bottles of cooking oil, bars of soap, boxes of pills. There were 20 rooms for just vitamin pills. One room was stacked with hundreds of cans of fruit. There was something called pineapple. I remember that one especially. What was pineapple? Asked Lina. It was yellow and sweet, said Granny with a dreamy look in her eyes. I had it 4 times before we ran out of it. But these tours had been discontinued long before Lina was born. The storerooms, people said, were no longer a pleasure to look at. Their dusty shelves stood mostly empty now. It was rumored that in some rooms nothing was left at all. A child seeing the rooms where powdered milk had once been stored, or the rooms that stored bandages or socks or pens or notebooks, or most of all, the dozens of rooms that had once held thousands of light bulbs, would not feel, as earlier generations of children had, that Ember was endlessly rich. Today's children, if they were to tour the storerooms, would feel afraid. Thinking about all this, Lina waited in the line of people at Lizzie's station. When she got to the front, she leaned forward with her elbows on the counter and whispered, "Lizzie, can you meet me after you're through with work? I'll wait for you right outside the door." Lizzie nodded eagerly. At 4 o'clock, Lizzie came trotting out of the office door. Lina said to her, "Will you come home with me for just a minute? I want to show you something." "Sure," said Lizzie, and as they walked, Lizzie talked. "My wrist is killing me from writing all day," she said. "You have to write in the tiniest letters to save paper, so I get a terrible cramp in my wrist and my fingers, and people are so rude. Today they were worse than ever. I said to some guy, 'You can't have 15 cans of corn. You can only have 3. And he said, 'Look, don't tell me that. I saw plenty of cans in the Pot Street Market just yesterday.' And I said, 'Well, that's why there aren't so many left today.' And he said, 'Don't be smart with me, you little carrot head.' But what am I supposed to do? I can't make cans of corn out of thin air." They passed through Harkin Square, around the Gathering Hall, and down Roving Street. There were 3 of the floodlights were out, making a cave of shadow. "Lizzie," said Lina, interrupting the flow of talk, "is it true about light bulbs?" "Is what true?" "That there aren't many left?" Lizzie shrugged. "I don't know. They hardly ever let us go downstairs into the storerooms. All we see are the reports the carriers turn in. Like how many forks are in room 1146, how many doorknobs are in 3291, how many children's shoes in 2249. I know, but when you see the report for the light bulb rooms, what does it say?" "I never get to see that one," said Lizzie. "That one and a few of the other ones, like the vitamin report, only a few people get to see." "Well, who?" "Oh, the mayor And of course, old Flab Face. Lina looked at her questioningly. You know, Farlow Batten, the head of the storerooms. He's so mean, Lina, you would just hate him. He counts us late if we come in even 2 minutes after 8. And he looks over our shoulders as we're writing, which is awful because he has bad breath. And he runs his finger over what we've written and he says, "This word is illegible. That word is illegible. Those numbers are illegible." It's his favorite word, illegible, which means you can't read it, it's too messy. When they came to Lina's street, Lina ducked her head in the door of the yarn shop and said hello to Granny. And then they climbed the stairs to the apartment. Lizzie was talking about how hard it was to stand up all day, how it made her knees ache, how her shoes pinched her feet. She stopped talking long enough to say hello to Eveline Murdo, who was sitting by the window with Poppy on her lap. And then she began as Lina led her into the bedroom. "Lina, where were you when the big blackout came?" she asked, but she went right on talking without waiting for an answer. "I was at home, luckily, but it was scary, wasn't it?" Lina nodded. She didn't want to talk about what had happened that day. "Oh, I hate those blackouts," Lizzie went on. "People say there's going to be more and more of them, and that someday—" She stopped, frowned, started again. "Anyway, nothing bad happened to me. After that, I got up and figured out a whole new way to do my hair." It seemed to Lina that Lizzie was like a clock wound up too tightly and running too fast. She had always been a little this way, but today she was more so than ever. Her gaze skipped from one spot to another. Her fingers twiddled with the edge of her skirt. She looked paler than usual, too. Her freckles stood out like little smudges of dirt on her nose. "Lizzie," said Lina, beckoning toward the table in the corner of the room, "I want to show you." But Lizzie wasn't listening. "You're so lucky to be a messenger, Lina," she said. "Is it fun? I wish I could have been one. I would have been so good at it. My job is so boring." Lina turned and looked at her. "Isn't there anything you like about it?" Lizzie pursed her lips in a tiny smile and looked sideways at Lina. "Well, there's one thing," she said. "What?" "I can't tell you, it's a secret." "Well, then you shouldn't have mentioned it at all," she thought. "Well, maybe I'll tell you someday," said Lizzie. "I don't know." "Well, I like my job," Lina said. "But look, what I wanted to talk to you about was what I found yesterday. It's this." She lifted the box away and took up one piece of paper covering the patched together document. Lizzie gave it a quick look. "Is it a message someone gave you that got torn up?" "No, it was in our closet. Poppy was chewing on it. That's why it's torn up. But look at the writing on it. Isn't it strange?" "Uh-huh," said Lizzie. You know who has beautiful handwriting? Mila Bone, who works with me. You should see it. It's got curly tails on the Y's and the G's and fancy loops on the capital letters. Of course, Flabface hates it. He says it's illegible." Lina slid the piece of paper back over the pasted down scraps. She wondered why she had thought Lizzie would be interested in what she had found. She had always had fun with Lizzie, but their fun was usually with games. Hide and seek, tag, the kinds of games where you run and climb. Lizzie never had been much interested in anything that was written on paper. So Lina quietly put the document back in its place, and she sat down with Lizzie on the floor. She listened and listened until Lizzie's chatter ran down. "I'd better go," Lizzie said. "It was fun to see you, Lina. I miss you." She stood up. She fluffed her hair. "Now, what was it you wanted to show me?" "Oh, yes, that fancy writing. Really nice. Lucky of you to find it. Come and see me again soon, all right? I get so bored in that office." Lina made beet soup for dinner that night, and Poppy spilled hers and made a red lake on the table. Granny stared into her bowl, stirring and stirring the soup with her spoon. But she didn't eat. She didn't feel quite right. She told Lina, after a while, and she wandered off to bed. Lina cleaned up the kitchen quickly. As soon as her chores were out of the way, she could get back to studying her document. She washed Poppy's clothes. She sewed on the buttons that had come off the messenger jacket. She picked up the rags and sacks and boxes and bags that Granny had tossed out of the closet. And by the time she had done all this and put Poppy to bed, she still had almost half an hour to study the fragments of paper. Pieces. She sat down at her desk and uncovered the document. With her elbows on either side of it and her chin resting in her hands, she pored over it. Now, this kind of poured is not like you pour a pitcher. This is poured. She really studied it hard. Though Lizzie and Captain Fleary had paid it no attention, Lina still thought this torn-up page must be important. Why else would it have been in such a cleverly fastened box? Maybe she should show it to the mayor, she thought reluctantly, like she really didn't want to do it. She didn't like the mayor. She didn't trust him either. But if this document was important to the future of the city, he was the one who should know about it. Of course, she couldn't ask the mayor to come to her house. She pictured him puffing up the stairs, squeezing through the door, looking disapprovingly at the clutter in their house, recoiling from Poppy's sticky hands. No, that just wouldn't work. But she didn't want to take her carefully patched together document to the gathering hall either. It was just too fragile. Like it would all fall apart. The best thing to do, she decided, was to write the mayor a note. She settled down to do this. She found a fairly unspoiled half piece of paper, and using a plain pencil, she wasn't going to waste her colored ones on the mayor, she wrote, "Dear Mayor Cole, I have discovered a document that was in the closet. It is instructions for something. I believe it is important because it is written in very old printing. Unfortunately, it got chewed up by my sister, so it is not all there, but you can still read some bits of it, such as marked with E, find door of bow, small steel pan. I will show you this document if you want to see it. Sincerely yours, Lina Mayfleet, Messenger, 34 Quilliam Square." She folded the note in half and wrote Mayor Cole on the front. On her way to work the next morning, she took it to the gathering hall. No one was sitting at the guard's desk, so Lina left the note there, placed so that the guard would see it when she arrived. Then, feeling that she had done her duty, she went off to her station. Several days went by. The messages Lina carried were full of worry and fear. "Do you have an extra baby drink? I can't find any at the store. Have you heard what they're saying about the generator? We can't come tonight. Grandpa B won't get out of bed." Every day when she got home from work, Lina asked Granny, "Did a message come for me?" But there was nothing. Maybe the mayor hadn't gotten her note. Maybe he had gotten it and paid no attention. After a week, Lina decided she was tired of waiting. If the mayor wasn't interested in what she had found, too bad for him. She was interested. She would figure it out herself. Twice during the week, when Poppy and Granny were both asleep, she had had a little free time. She spent this time making a copy of the document in case anything happened to the fragile original. It had taken her a long time. She used one of her few remaining pieces of paper, an old label, slightly torn, from a can of peas. The copy was as accurate as she could make it, with the missing bits between the letters carefully indicated as dashes. She had tucked it under the mattress of her bed for safekeeping. Now she finally had a whole evening free. Poppy and Granny were both asleep, and the apartment was tidy. Lina sat down at her table and uncovered the patched document. She tied back her hair so it wouldn't keep falling in her face, and she put a piece of paper next to her, blank except for a little bit of Poppy's scribbling, to write down what she decoded. She started with the title. The first word had already figured it out. She'd already figured out. It had to be instructions. The next word could be for. Then came egress. She wasn't sure about that. Maybe it was someone's name. Egressman, Egreston. Instructions for Egreston. She decided to call it the instructions for short. She went on to the first line. This offish doc. Well, that probably meant this official document. Maybe secure meant secure or security. Then there were the words period and ears and city. But after that, so much was missing. She studied the line next to the number 1. X, EXP. That could be expect, expert, or so many things. Or it might be part of she moved on to RIV. That might be part of a word like drive or strive. What could ip and orc possibly be? They were so close together, maybe they were part of one word. What ended with ip? What ended with ip? Whip, Lina thought. Trip, slip. What ended with orc? Fork came to mind. Immediately, trip fork, slip fork. Nothing came she could think of that made sense. Maybe it wasn't fork. What else ended in orc? Starting at the beginning of the alphabet, Lina went through all the words that rhymed with fork. Most of them were nonsense. Bork, dork, gork, hork, jork. This isn't going to work, she thought miserably. Oh, work. The word could be work. Then what would the first part be? Trip work? Flip work? But maybe there was a letter between the P and the W. Dips work? Pips work? Suddenly it came to her. Pipeworks! Pipeworks! That had to be it. Something in this message was about the pipeworks. Lina looked back at EXP and RIV. Riv! That could be river. Rapidly, she ran her eyes down the page. In line 3, she saw a verb NK. That looked like riverbank. The word door jumped out at her from line 4. Door jumped out at her. Personification. On line 4, hole on its scrap of paper. Lina took a quick breath. A door. What if it was the one she had wished for? The one that led to the other city? Maybe her city was real after all, and these were instructions for finding it. She wanted to leap from her chair and shout. The message had something to do with the river, a door, and the pipeworks. And who did she know who knew about the pipeworks? Dune, of course. She pictured his thin, serious face and his eyes looking out searchingly from beneath his dark eyebrows. She pictured how he used to bend over his work at school, holding his pencil in a hard grip, and how during free time he was usually off by himself in a corner, studying a moth or a worm or a taken apart clock. That was one thing at least that she liked about Dune. He was curious. He paid attention to things, and he cared about things too. She remembered how he had been on assignment day, so furious at the mayor, so eager to trade his good job for her bad one, so he could help save the city. And he had taken Poppy inside his father's shop on the day of the blackout, so she wouldn't be afraid. Why had she stopped being friends with Dune? She vaguely, that means just a little bit, recalled the incident of the light pole. It seemed silly now, and long ago. The more she thought about Dune, the more it seemed he was the very person, the only person, who might be interested in what she had found. She placed the plain sheet of paper over the instructions and put the box on top. I'll go and find Dune, she thought. Tomorrow was Thursday, their day off. She would find him tomorrow and ask for his help. Ooh, okay, that was a good chapter 6 and 7. It's getting good now. Okay, so she can see certain parts of it. Instructions for Ember. She figures it's instructions to get out. Now, these were written about 250 years ago, remember. Okay, the next chapter is going to be called Explorations. All right, she's going to get Dune, and Dune doesn't mind exploring in the pipeworks. All right, bye, boys and girls. See you next time.